Welcome to Handmade with Holly. My name is Holly Michelson. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Del Mar, New York, just outside of Albany. I'm really excited that you're here today. Whether you're a new visitor or returning back, thanks so much for joining me because I have a really cool project planned for today and I'm excited to share it with you. Now, we're going to be using the Welcoming Woods stamp set. This stamp set comes from the mini catalog that went live in August of 2021, and it's right here on page 46. This is a photopolymer stamp set, and it focuses on this image of a stand of birch trees. And there's really a great assortment of sentiments, everything from happy birthday, thank you for your kindness, best wishes, celebrate, hello friend. That gives you lots of different options for birthday, good luck, thank you, friendship cards, lots of really great options with those sentiments. But my two favorite sentiments in this stamp set are good luck on your new adventure and every season brings its own wonder. I love this good luck on your new adventure stamp. Right now, I think we're all aware we're going through the great resignation where in the pandemic, so many people are changing jobs, stopping working, focusing on family. It just seems like every other day I find another friend or former colleague who is changing jobs, myself included. So I think this stamp is super fun to make cards for all of these people that are starting new adventures. My favorite sentiment though in the stamp set is this one here. Every season brings its own wonder. The foliage is starting to peak right now. It is just a gorgeous time to be outside and to be in New England. And I do think that the seasons bring their own wonder. This sentiment also really speaks to the versatility of this stamp set and the fact that you both have an impression of leaves and an impression of snowflakes so that you could either make fall themed cards or winter themed cards. So lots of fun there. In addition to that, we're going to be using some gorgeous designer series paper. And if you've never seen this paper before, I'm not surprised. Two reasons. First of all, this is paper that is exclusively available to people who host a party. So this paper came out in the annual catalog in May of 2021, and it's found here on page 171. It's a pack of paper called Pattern Party, and you can see the piece we're going to use right here. That doesn't look like the same paper, does it? And it's not. I'm going to show you how to jazz up this black and white paper and turn it into the sample that I just showed you. In order to be a hostess with Stampin' Up, you either need to place an order of your own or recruit other people to make purchases that total at least $150. So if you get a couple of friends together and everybody orders a bundle, you'll easily get to $150. For me, most orders I place are at least $150 because there's so many awesome goodies in the catalog. Once you have an order that qualifies of $150 or more, either a combination of yours and other people's or your own, then you earn what's called Stampin' Rewards. As part of Stampin' Rewards, there are always exclusive hostess perks. And so this paper shows up in the exclusive hostess perks where only hostesses can order the paper. So this paper is a steal. It contains 48 sheets of 12 by 12 paper, not 6 by 6, 12 by 12 paper. You get 48 sheets of it for $18 worth of Stampin' Rewards. But because you're using your rewards, the paper is actually free to you and you get these great colors and patterns. So 12 different designs that are double-sided, which means really you get 24 different designs. And you can see really bright, fun colors, everything from stripes, scallops, polka dots, hearts, animal prints. We've got floral motif here. This one's a gorgeous floral pattern. There's actually an embossing folder that matches this perfectly. You could get that and emboss the paper to make the flowers three-dimensional. And then if these beautiful colors and papers weren't great enough, if you turn them over, we have a full set of black and white patterns on the reverse side. For those of you that like to make black and white cards or need backgrounds to contrast with other color combinations. This is the paper that we're using today, this one here with the fall leaves. And you'll notice that it looks very different, and we're gonna get to that in just a moment. So we're also using the Bark 3D embossing folder, and this embossing folder allows you to make a texture on your paper that looks like tree bark. And I'm gonna use one of the dies from the Scalloped Contours die set to make a sentiment label. The card that we're gonna make today is a bridge fold card. And so if you see, it stands up and it's 3-dimensional, but it also folds flat so that it's easy to mail. How cool is that? Whoever invented this fold, I give you a lot of props. I think this is ingenious, the way that it's 3-dimensional and also flat for mailing. I'm a huge fan of this layout and excited to share it with you today. I have 5 more samples to show you at the end. 4 of them are fall cards using the Welcoming Woods stamp set, different layouts. And then I have a second bridge fold card, and instead of a fall scene, I have a lovely winter scene. So stay with me all the way to the end. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a piece of very vanilla cardstock. This is the thick version. So this is the heavyweight cardstock, and I did that deliberately because this card is going to stand up. It's going to have some motion activity folding it for an envelope. So I preferred the thick version of Very Vanilla. And this is cut at 8 inches wide and 4 1/4 high. So easy to get out of a piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock. And I've pre-scored it here. Don't worry about the measurements. I will provide all of those in the description for the video so that you'll be able to grab them later and make your own card. But I did score this at 1 1/4, 2 1/2, 5 1/2, and 6 3/4. And I just pre-scored it, trying to be respectful of your time. In addition to that, we're gonna need a piece of DSP. This measures 4 by 4. And you'll see that seems bigger than what we have here on the card, but we're gonna add our ink and then cut it into our strips during the video. I find that it's easier to do the coloring while it's still in this larger piece size. I also have a piece of basic white, and this is gonna be the back panel on the card where we're gonna make our birch tree scene. And this measures 2 3/4 by 4 inches. I already pre-cut a quick sentiment label using that Scalloped Contours die, and I just used the Very Vanilla cardstock. And I have a piece of Cajun Craze cardstock. This measures 1 by 5 1/4 inches. And then I ran that through the Bark embossing folder, and it came out like this with this really gorgeous wood texture to look like tree bark. So that's all of our pieces and parts for the card. We're also going to use several ink colors. So today I have Cajun Craze, Pumpkin Pie, Bumblebee, Old Olive, and Smoky Slate. And I'm also going to need blending brushes to blend the ink. When I'm filming my videos, I like to use a piece of scrap paper on my grid paper, just because when I make a mess, then I can whisk it away and go back to a clean surface for the rest of the video. When I'm stamping by myself, I make all this mess directly on my grid paper, which is honestly the point of the grid paper. But for some reason, I have this OCD thing when I'm filming. I like to keep the grid paper clean for you. We're going to start off with our DSP, our leaf paper that came from the Pattern Party pack. And we're going to go ahead and add some color to that. So the way that I added the color is I started with my Bumblebee and I brought in a blending brush and just tapped it on the ink pad Now, I recommend you kind of first tap it on your scratch paper before you put it directly to your DSP. Usually the first touch with the blending brush might kind of leave a little bit of a darker impression, and so I kind of get that off first and then run it over my paper. So I'm just gonna literally swish this all over the paper, transforming all of these leaves to yellow. I'm not even worried if I hit the black parts. The yellow does not show up on those. And I can keep adding ink to my liking, making areas lighter or darker. But our goal here is to make sure that we don't have any white leaves. I don't know about you, but I never see white leaves during the fall foliage. Now you'll notice I've been skipping some of the tapping off. And part of that's because I'm not really worried about splotches on this application. I actually do want variations of shade. I want areas to be lighter and darker as they would be in the fall foliage. But later on when we do the background scene, it'll be more important to do the tapping off. So do as I say, not as I do, I guess, right? All right, so now I've got some yellow on all of those leaves. No more white fall foliage leaves, right? I actually grew up in North Adams, Massachusetts. And in North Adams, the foliage is the highlight of the year. It's in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and it's absolutely the most gorgeous time of year. We have a big fall foliage festival and a fall foliage parade. So growing up, I was always in the parade one way or another for a Halloween costume or dancing in the band front or being a flag girl or some other great carrying a banner, advertising for some local business. That parade was a staple of me growing up. And so the fall time is a really special time of year for me, thinking about the majestic beauty of the mountains here in the Northeast and all the gorgeous trees. I just absolutely love it. Now that I've finished with all of the yellow, I'm gonna come in and bring in some Cajun Craze. Now with the Cajun Craze, I wanna be a little bit more sparing. So you'll notice on this paper, there are areas where the yellow is still shining through. There are areas where the Cajun Craze is more prominent. I wanna get a really nice combination of that blend. So I'm gonna bring in my orange brush and use it on the Cajun Craze. And I'm gonna be a little more selective this time than I was with the yellow. Again, okay if we get those darker spots for the purpose of this background, because we really do want different shades and tones than we want for the background scene that will come later. So I'm just moving around the page, picking areas. Some leaves I might be doing the entire leaf in Cajun Craze. Other leaves I might just be accenting around the yellow. Really up to you. You could go over this super fast and not really think about it much if you like, or you could take a little bit more of a methodical approach about how you want to do it. But really you're just trying to get varied color and tone onto your leaves, which is truly how the fall foliage looks. I mean, nothing is uniform. That's the whole point of fall foliage, right? All the majestic beauty, reds, oranges, yellows, and greens, and then of course browns as the leaves are dying. Let's see. Kind of give it another eye and just look for places where maybe we think we have a little too much yellow and bring a little bit more of our Cajun Craze, that burnt orange in, if you will. What do you think? I think that looks pretty good. And remember, you don't need to be too fussy about this because we're going to be cutting this down into 1-inch strips. So the amount people will see in any one given spot is relatively small anyway. Okay, so now we have our DSP made for our side panels of the card. Now it's time for us to start work on our back image. And we're gonna bring in our small piece of Whisper White cardstock. This time I'm going to stamp with the Smoky Slate. You could choose soft suede or maybe crumb cake. even gray granite if you wanted. I went with the Smoky Slate because I felt like it looked a little bit more like birch trees. Birch trees are kind of a whitish gray. And so I liked the Smoky Slate. Okay, now we want to stamp our trees on the back scene. And so we're going to start off with the birch stamp, making sure that the branches are facing upward. We want to make sure we have the top and the bottom distinguished. And I'm going to use Smoky Slate. Now, whenever I'm stamping a stamp that is larger or similar size to the ink pad, I like to have the block on the table with the stamp facing up. It's a lot easier than trying to dip it into the pad when you have a larger stamp. I'm going to go ahead and flip the stamp over, and I'm going to stamp it down on my piece of paper. I'm going to make sure that the top of the trees hang over the edge of my paper though. That way I'll get a nice straight line for the trees. They end at different heights on the stamp. I'm going to get a nice straight line where the trees are extending beyond the scene that I'm picturing. And that's also going to free up some space at the bottom to allow me to add some green grass, if you can see that there. Now I'm going to go ahead and use whole hand pressure on the block because this is a larger stamp, and then just kind of run my fingers over the trunks, making sure that the ink transfers. When I have a big stamp like this, I like to leave it on the paper an extra 10 or 15 seconds, and that extra time lets the ink transfer to the paper. And then when I peel it off, you can see I have a perfect impression. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring in our blending brushes and start to add the background color to our scene. So I'm going to put my stamp pads in the order that I want to use my ink. I'm going to start with Cajun Craze, then Pumpkin Pie, into Bumblebee, and then Old Olive for the grassy area. And that'll just help me work in the right order. Start with the Cajun Craze. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to want to make sure that we're tapping off the ink so that we don't get a harsh spot like that in our scene. That was fine when we were doing the leaves, and I wanted some of them to be darker in spots, but I don't want that effect for my sunset coloring on the back. So you see I got that harsh spot there on the scrap paper, but not on my project. And now I'm just kind of moving back and forth and blending the ink. And when I feel like I'm ready for a little bit more color, see I did get a few little spots there, I can bring it in and blend it. And I'm just smoothing out the Cajun Craze across my forest. It's fine to go right over your trees, in fact, no need to try to get in between those little branches. And I like that. I don't want the sky to be too orange. So I'm pretty happy with that. And now I'm going to bring in the Pumpkin Pie. Since Pumpkin Pie and Cajun Craze are really in the same orange color family, I'm going to use the same blending brush. I'm just going to take a moment to rub this off on my paper and get any excess Cajun Craze off here on my scratch paper so that I don't cross-contaminate it into my Pumpkin Pie ink pad. You could, if you wanted to buy multiples of the blending brushes, you could designate a brush for each color ink pad. I tend to use one for each color family, the same one for all my blues, the same one for all my greens, etc. You can also wash these with water and rinse out the ink and let them dry. That's just a little fussier than I like to be. And also I wouldn't want this brush to be wet and have to wait for it to dry before I could put it in the Pumpkin Pie. So here we go with the Pumpkin Pie, and I'm gonna get right up on that Cajun Craze and overlap them a little bit so that they blend. And I'm gonna start bringing that down further. Remember, I'm still gonna add in some yellow, so I don't wanna go too far down that I don't have room for my yellow. But I think this adds some really nice sunset effect. And now we're gonna switch to the Bumblebee. For the Bumblebee, this color family is significantly different than what I've been using, so I'm going to come in with a new blending brush, and this one is designated for my yellows. And so I'm going to come in and start to add my Bumblebee. Again, you want to make sure that you're bringing that up into the pumpkin pie, so it's kind of a seamless transition. And we don't want to go all the way to the bottom because remember, we're still going to bring in our old olive for some grass. So I'm kind of getting right down there to the bottom of the trees where we think the grass would begin. And I'm going to finish up with the Bumblebee. Now onto the old olive. And again, I have a different brush, this one designated for greens. Just rotating my paper only so that my hand isn't in the way for you to see what I'm doing. Where I was just about to put my hand, I think I would have blocked your view. So now I'm bringing in some old olive at the very bottom, making grass. I have a few streaks in there. I actually think that looks good. Grass, you know, is kind of variegated in tone, and so I think that almost makes it look like some individual grass. And I'm just going to bring it up a little bit into the yellow, so again, that it feels seamless, and blend it till I'm really happy with that. Oh my gosh, I think that's so beautiful. I just need a little bit up by this tree so that tree looks like it's grounded and not floating. That tree, you know, the grass should come up to the base of those trees at the very least, right? So they look like they're rooted in the ground. Awesome. I'm super happy with that. So now that we have our background, we're going to go ahead and stamp our leaves. So for the leaves, I'm going to use two colors. I'm going to use Bumblebee and Cajun Craze. Okay, I'm going to start with the Bumblebee. This is the lighter color. I like to start with the lighter color because I feel like that is the color I tend to use more of, and that way it helps it stand out against whatever brighter color there might be. And I'm just going to rotate the stamp in various directions so that the leaves don't look like they're all falling in the same direction. I'm going to try to take some care to make sure that I have some leaves coming off the scene. Try to put some in like that over there. And I'm also going to focus on making a pile here on the ground. When leaves fall, of course, they accumulate on the ground. So we're going to build up a little pile of leaves here, simulating that real life effect. Sorry that my hand gets in the way. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to clean off my stamp. Cleaning my stamp off camera with my Stampin' chamois. And now I'm going to come in with the Cajun Craze, and I'm going to add some additional leaves that are darker in tone. Kind of give it that fall effect. And I'm also going to put some of those leaves down on the ground. Now in this case, I'm going to use the second generation of the Cajun Craze to also fill in a little bit of the ground a little bit more without making that too over, you know, trying not to make those ground leaves too much of the focal point. So I used a lot of second generation stamping down there at the bottom, kind of filling in those falling leaves without having it call too much attention to the ground. All right, so that's our scene. And now look at this, I can pull my scrap paper away and we have a reasonably clean surface. So we have our square of leaves. We need to cut those into 4 pieces that we can use on the panels of our card. So let's bring in the Stampin' trimmer. Now this, as you recall, is 4 by 4, and so we're gonna cut it into 4 1-inch strips. I'm just gonna line that up right there on the trimmer and use the cutting blade. Whoops, my desk is not fully on camera. I'll move that up. Let's do that again. 1 inch, and then 1 inch. Perfect, and now we've got 4 strips. Now, if you're discerning like me and you kind of like to see the leaf pattern carry through, go ahead and keep them in the same order that you cut them. Then we can see that leaf finishes off there. You can see their continuation. That's a very super minor detail most people would never even notice. So if yours are mixed up, no worries, just go ahead and put them down. And now let's bring in our card base and our bone folder so that we can burnish these creases and make nice seams. We're going to take the first, doesn't matter which side you start from, it's both the same. We're going to take the first score line and we're going to bend it so that it becomes a mountain fold. And a mountain fold means that the peak is at the top, right? So we're going to bend that into a mountain fold and then take our bone folder and give it a good burnish. Then we're going to come to the next score mark and we're going to give it a valley fold, meaning we're going to fold it in the opposite direction and we're going to give that a good burnish. And so you see how that makes the Z there on the card. All right, and now we're going to turn it around and do the same thing. The first fold is going to be a mountain fold. So we're folding the paper away from us. Then we're going to make a valley fold. This one's going to come in. Okay. And so those are our folds. Actually, to be honest, I probably could have put down the paper before I did the folds. That might have even been easier. But I already folded it, so we'll try it this way. I'm going to start working left to right. And I'm going to go ahead and put my seal adhesive on the back of that. Sometimes my seal adhesive, when I first pick it up and haven't used it in a little while, is slow to get started, and I just use my thumb to give it a little push and then it gets going. So that's one. Now I'm going to come put the next one down. Again, I'm paying attention to the orientation so that they line up and it's a continuation, but that's purely optional. What I would recommend is maybe not optional though, is that you pay attention to the bottom and top edges so they look like a nice clean straight line. And so I just kind of line up the second one so that it feels even with the first one. Now let's go ahead and do our scene. That way we can get that well aligned. And I'm going to go ahead and put seal on the back of that. And line that up as well. Oh my goodness, doesn't this just look like it's going to be gorgeous? It's really coming together. And now we'll go ahead and do our third set of leaves. Again, lining it up with the panel that came before so they form a nice straight line across the horizon. And our last one. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to bring in the strip of Cajun Craze. I embossed this in advance to save some time. And I also have that label from Scalloped Contours dies. I've pre-stamped it with the Every Season Brings Its Own Wonder. And we're going to go ahead and mount that on here. Let's bring in some dimensionals. I did not do that on my original sample, but every time I play, I always kind of fuss and do something a little bit different. So this time we'll go ahead and use dimensionals and pop that up. Taking off the paper backing with my Take Your Pick tool. And go ahead and center that on your Cajun Craze. That looks pretty good to me. Make sure it's straight. All right. Okay, so in order to attach our bridge to the card, we're going to need to use our Stampin' Seal adhesive, or you could use Stampin' Seal Plus. And we're going to want to be sure that we're only putting the seal on the ends. On the right side and on the left side, we're gonna be sure not to put any adhesive here in the middle. So if you look at how this card is, the middle needs to be free floating. When we fold the card down, if you have adhesive here on the back, it's gonna stick the card like this, and we don't want that to happen. We want it to pop back up after it comes out of the envelope. So be sure that you're only putting adhesive on the left side and the right side, and then we're gonna go ahead and mount it. So what I'm gonna do is close the card as though I were going to put it in an envelope, and then I'm gonna pick up my bridge and I'm gonna align the left side with the DSP on the left and the right side with the DSP on the right, and get that nice and straight and flat. Press it down. We're gonna go ahead and pop it open, and now we have our bridge fold. So look at that. I think this card is just gorgeous. I love this amazing fall sunset with the falling leaves, and remembering that we started off with black and white DSP. This is just beautiful. I am very, very happy with this card. If you love this card, let me show you another version of it. I made you a winter version. So this one is the same technique. Instead of using the leaf stamp, I use the snowflakes. So I simply use the same snowflake stamp. And remember, that's right here in Welcoming Woods. I just took the snowflake stamp and made my own DSP to coordinate, and used the same. Every season brings its own wonder. Now this time for the embossing folder, I didn't want tree bark. I wanted something that was wintry. So I brought in the Wintry 3D embossing folder. This is a 2 set of half-size embossing folders, and these are meant to go in the mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. They work in the full size, but they're small enough that they can go in the mini. And so I use this one that has these gorgeous snowflakes. And I don't know if you can see that, but I embossed the snowflakes here on my bridge. So I'm really excited about that. The trees are still the same Smoky slate that we used here. They look a little browner here from all of the orange that we rubbed over the ink. Here they really look like birch trees. And the other difference is that I used cardstock. This is Balmy Blue. I used cardstock to mat my snowflakes and also my scene in the background. And part of why I did that was because it's on a white card base, and so there was just a lot of white on white. I thought the blue really brought in a lot of color. In order to do that, you're going to need to make your dimensions for the back scene a 1/4 size smaller, and you'll need to make these strips a 1/4 size smaller. So in other words, instead of this strip being 1 inch wide, now the cardstock is 1 inch wide, and the white piece is only 3/4 of an inch. I'll put all those dimensions in the description for the video for you. Really very easy to make simple adjustments and go from a gorgeous fall card to a stunning winter card. So how versatile this stamp set is, I just love it. And when I say I just love it, I'm not exaggerating. I'm so in love with the stamp set. Let me show you some other samples that I've made with it. Give a shout out to Terry Gaines. I watched a great video that she did, and she was showing making the fall scene horizontally, where you actually repeat the stamp twice. It hangs off the page, but that gives you a wide horizontal scene instead of vertical. And then she also showed a neat idea. Instead of just using the birch leaves that come in the stamp set, if you have this gorgeous leaves stamp set, you could use this, and then you get a variety of different types of leaves. So that was an interesting take. Whenever I look at another demo for inspiration for my cards, I always want to change it up and make it my own. So while I did mimic what Terry did in terms of making a horizontal scene with stamping the trees twice and switching out the stamp to use the one from Gorgeous Leaves, I mixed it up with my own ribbon, a completely different sentiment label. I think I used different cardstock than she did, and a completely different sentiment. This one's going to be a fall birthday card for my brother-in-law. Then once I got going, I just kept going, and I made this one. Went back to the vertical orientation, but you can see this circle came from the Give It a Whirl dies. So it looks like this, but it actually cuts out the center circle and the borders. I made one on crushed curry and I made one on basic white, and then I mixed and matched. I took the border from this one and put it here and vice versa. And then this leaf right here, again, just came in from the Gorgeous Leaves stamp set. I borrowed that stamp for here. And the thank you for your kindness. I mean, first of all, that fit beautifully in that space down here, but that's also from the Welcoming Wood stamp set. We saw that before. Thank you for your kindness. So that's another idea. And then I decided to start playing with the colored backgrounds. Where these are white, I thought I would try to bring in some color. So here I used a sponge dauber. So this is daubed on. Didn't use the blending brushes. Balmy blue for the sky. Down here I used some soft suede and I think some cinnamon cider to make the dirt for the ground like a forest floor. And I actually borrowed the clouds from the Give It a Whirl dies, and I just set those down and used my dauber around the cloud and then just daubed a little blue in the cloud, trying to make that cloud scene. And this label right here is placed very strategically, and I did that there because this is where the trees end. And rather than have the trees just stop and then the clouds, I put the sentiment there, and so that masked the ending of the trees and the beginning of the clouds. I thought that was a clever way to work on the horizon perspective of sky versus top of trees. So there's one idea. And then I think my last one is this one. This is probably not my most favorite one. On this one, I was trying a technique of, instead of using the dauber where I dabbed the ink, I used the blending brushes where I blended the sky. I tried to add some sunlight into there. I think that came out a little too strong. Next time I would soften that. Maybe instead of using the Bumblebee, I'd maybe switch to So Saffron so that would be more subtle. Again, played around with the blender brushes for making the ground and stamping the leaves. The other piece is I took a full-size card front piece, so 5.5 by 4 1/4 of basic white, and I cut a circle out of it. I think this is the largest die from the Layering Circles dies, and I put that over the trees using Stampin' Dimensionals. Added some dimension, and now it kind of looks like you're looking through that circle to the scene. Again, my strategy here was dealing with the fact that the trees were shorter than my card, and so you were kind of looking into where you were viewing the trees. I love, love, love these, and of course, I'm in love with these bridge fold cards. So I really hope you've enjoyed this project. I'd appreciate it if you would leave me a comment. Let me know which is your favorite. Do you prefer the fall scene? Or do you prefer the winter snow scene? I'd love for you to leave me a comment here on YouTube and let me know which one's your favorite. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video and these great projects. If you're interested in purchasing the Welcoming Wood stamp set, any of the embossing folders that we used today, or any Stampin' Up! Products, I'd appreciate it if you would select me as your demonstrator. Down in the description, I have a link to my online store. I'd be more than happy to help you get these great products and make awesome projects. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think my next video is going to be a great fall card using the Gorgeous Leaves stamp set, so you'll want to be sure that you're subscribed and you have enabled the notifications so that you'll see it when that video is ready. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Until the next time. Bye.